The other issue is the jury might be hearing words and translating it themselves, and they're supposed to be listening to the translator. You know, the other issue I wanted to ask you, Trey, if you are listening in on this, which I know you are, one of the things is this is a defense witness. How do you think the attorney for the defendant is handling the questioning of this particular witness?
Been discussed. It's harder when you have a witness that has to testify through a translator. You lose a lot of that connection with the jury. The other difficulty is just how far away this particular individual was from everything that was happening, and in terms of just being able to see everything. But overall, I would say the defense attorney is doing a good job. It's landing very cold and very flat in terms of its testimony. It's not super compelling. It's going to be difficult to move the needle with the jury with this particular witness given this testimony.
Exactly. All right. I still have with me Trey Gober and Dante Mills. I'm going to start with you. I think I'll start with Trey this time. Trey, one of the things that Pilliquin told the prosecutors that he wishes he did things differently that day. Do you think that is going to help the defense? I mean, is it like an admission? Is it like maybe he could have done things differently that day?
I mean, the defense is going to hang their hat on everything that they can. I think that's an honest response. Anytime something like this happens, we as humans should look back and see what could we have done differently, whether we were at fault or not, to have made things different or had a different result at the end of the day. That's only human. That's natural. That's honest and credible. And so the prosecution shouldn't have a hard time flipping that in their closing rebuttal, if that is part of the defense's strategy in their closing.
What is your thought about the chaotic scene that was taking place out there?
Well, it was certainly a chaotic scene. However, I think what it's ultimately going to come down to is who approached who. And we have video to demonstrate, that Mr. Mew approached the group of boys first. It was chaotic, but he was the one who injected that into the situation. And then there's going to be the question of who threw the first punch. So it was a tough scene all the way around. Everybody was drinking, everybody was rowdy, but the jury's going to have. They have video. They don't have to guess on what happened and when.
And Trey, do you agree? Do you think this sentence is a slap on the wrist, or do you think it's appropriate? I mean, what kind of message does it send?
Well, I think the message that has to be sent that's really important is that this defendant is going to be treated like every other defendant. Just because this is a high-profile, well-known, publicized matter, this defendant should receive the same justice, be subject to the same justice system as everyone else. And so if this was not a high-profile defendant, given the charge, given the findings of the jury, these results at all wouldn't be that surprising. I'm glad that there is accountability, that there's an opportunity to learn from what happened here so that it doesn't happen again. But I'm not at all surprised, and I don't disagree with the result.
Exactly. I think there will be people feeling differently on both sides, but I do think it makes sense under these circumstances. Exactly. And Trey, we have information that this has already hurt his career. We know that he was dropped. We reported about that earlier. How do you think this sentence is going to affect his career? Do you think that Marvel will now look at him, or other studios will look at him and say, all right, he is going to have this time, but he's not going to be behind bars. This is an appropriate sentence, and you can come back to acting? Or is this going to affect his career for the rest of his life?
It's hard to say. Certainly as time passes and depending on his response to these courses and the punishment that he's received, if it seems like there's truly a lesson learned here on his part and not just a doubling down on denying accountability, I could see eventually he could get back into being offered contracts again for performing in the future. But it's just going to be a matter of time to see if the public's willing to forgive him for what happened here. And in part, it's going to depend on the resolution of this civil case that's pending. If the plaintiff, the alleged victim in this case, or the victim in this case, ends up making a recovery, and as part of that recovery, says, okay, she's been compensated and justice has been done, that's going to go a long way to helping his career in the future.
All right, Trey, I want to ask you about another motion that was filed by Brian Steele after he wanted to limit the lyrics that were brought into the case. Judge Glanville denied that motion. What's your thought on that? There's been a lot of discussion about this.
Yeah, so, we're going to constantly see this more prejudicial than probative discussion. Just because something is true, just because something was said in a lyric, is that probative to help the jury decide the elements of the charges that they're going to be presented in the court's charge at the end of the day? Certainly, we know why the prosecution wants to bring those lyrics in. The defense, position is, look, this is really just trying to aggravate, to really incite the jury with how severe some of these the lyrics are, and especially on how they relate to the actual charges. So this is always discretionary on the part of the court. It's not a surprise that the court allowed the lyrics in. It's going to be something for the defense to try to clean up an argument.